everybody smoked. Everybody smoked. We had a good childhood. We didn't know we were poor because everybody else was just like us.
Back in them days, people were people. And if you wanted to, if that's the only place you got to go, they'll take you in.
My name is Mildred Louise Pfingston, or should I say Williams Pfingston. I was born April the 25th, 1930. I weighed 5 pounds. I was born in Vanderburgh County, Evansville, Indiana. I'm 75 years old. This is December the 18th, 2005. Evansville would probably be considered a small industrial city, although they had quite a lot of industry. There were 2 automobile factories, and there was 1 truck factory. They manufactured refrigerators. They had canning factories, a large pottery that was well known at that time throughout the country. It was founded from the Erie Canal. The history of Evansville goes back into where the Erie Canal came through town, and there's the street in the city named Canal Street, and that's where the canal came through town. Right at that corner on Canal was a great big vinegar factory, and it stunk something awful. You go to town on the bus or streetcar, you could tell before you got there. And there's just a lot of manufacturing went on. Kraft Foods had a big place there. There's several plastic places moved in after the war. It's mostly, though, in the outlying areas, farm area. Corn crops and vegetables, and small truck farmers. Santa Claus, Indiana is probably 40 miles from Evansville, which was always a big deal when we were kids. But my Grandpa Williams' family were supposed to be German and Irish. I don't know about my Grandma Williams. My grandpa and grandmother Stone, on my mother's side, she was of English descent. I don't know on my grandpa Stone. My Grandpa Williams' name was Jess Williams. Her name was Pearl Cobb Williams. My grandmother Stone was Cordelia Allen Stone, and my grandpa's name was Lehman Stone. I don't know where they were born. My mother was Gracie Bethel Stone Williams, and my dad was Carl Edgar Williams. I have 3 brothers and myself, and I'm the oldest. My next brother was Douglas, and he died in June 2003. He died on my stepmother's birthday, April 30th. My next brother is Jesse Donald Williams. He lives in Bardstown, Kentucky, and he's now 71 years old. And my brother Wayne is 65, and he is hospitalized in a nursing home with cancer at this point. There was only one society at that time that was all poor, because we lived during the Depression, and we basically lived most of the time at my grandma's house, which was Olive Street, and all the neighbors knew each other. Everybody was good friends, kind of helped take care of each other. And my grandpa's house always had people in it that didn't live there other than us, because anybody come to his house and needed a home, they had one. And no matter how much you had or how less you had, if you didn't have a place to stay, you could stay there. And he was just I thought he was a mean old man, but I think he was the best man I ever knew because he taught me everything I know, and I think a lot of my the way I am is because of my grandpa. I can remember if you wanted to borrow a nickel from my grandpa, he might would let you have it the first time, but if you didn't pay him back, he didn't let you have it the next time. And he had one little pencil he carried in his pocket. And if you borrowed his pencil and didn't bring it back, you didn't get to borrow his pencil anymore. So it's my grandma. She was a pretty lady. She was always an old lady. Ever since I can remember, I never knew her as a young woman. But at the time, she probably was only maybe 45 or 50. But she just was. She looked old, but she had the most beautiful hair. And she could sit on her hair. And I used to love to play with her hair because when she'd do her shampoo, she'd sit in the sun and I would brush her hair and make it up and do hairdos for her and just really enjoyed playing with her hair. And when she'd go to the grocery store, she always put her hat on and she carried an umbrella in the summertime to keep the sun off of her. And she was pretty prissy, but she was also very high-tempered. She could be a real mad lady sometimes. And Grandpa teased her to make her mad. We had a good childhood. We didn't know we were poor because everybody else was just like us. Well, we went to church. I can't remember a time when I didn't go to church with my grandma and grandpa. Or we went to the church on the corner. And everybody seemed to take care of their own business. They didn't jump in and tell other people that they don't have any legal rights or anything like that. It's just you did what came necessary to do, and you did it as it came. And everybody smoked. Everybody smoked. And of course, it's like all times people drank too much. Only it's just worse, I think. And never heard of women's rights until I was 65 or 70 years old, when all this stuff came out. Women took care of their family, and women that had to work went to work because they had to. During the war, women went to work because the country needed them. As far as racial, Evansville is on the Mason-Dixon line, which is a dividing line between the North and South. And I'm sure that there was a lot of racial stuff went on, but as far as I was concerned, I didn't know. They were black, and we had black people we lived around. We have Olive Street and Sycamore Street, and this way to the right from my grandpa's house was several colored families, and there were white families lived on both sides. And I didn't ever hear of anybody being mean or anything to those people, but there was one little black girl I was scared to death of because she wanted to whip me, and I would hide. If I thought she'd be in the front of her house, I'd go down the alley, because my uncle lived next door to a little girl that I played with all the time that was black, and her name was Sugar Babe. That's the only name I ever knew was Sugar Babe. And her grandma would give us cookies, and I knew I could eat Grandma Cookie's cookies, but I knew that I couldn't go in Grandma Cookie's house. Now, nobody ever told me not to, but it was just there that I knew I wasn't supposed to go in Grandma Cookie's house. But if I went from Grandma Cookie's and Sugar Babe's house, I always tried to find out where that little black girl was, because I was a big chicken. But anyway, city buses and stuff, I think that they were supposed to sit in the back of the bus, and I think I must have been the first year of high school, and I got on a city bus, and there wasn't any seats around, and I looked back in the back, and there was a seat back there, so I went back there and sat down, and people all over that bus were looking at me. I thought, what's the matter with these people? Why are they looking at me? But after I got old enough to realize what was going on, it's because I wasn't supposed to be back there. That was for the black people. But as far as And I'm sure Grandpa could tell you the same thing. Some of his best friends were probably black boys. Daddy waking us up at night when he come home from work and bringing us ice cream. On payday, he would always bring us an ice cream bar. And in the wintertime, in the fall, we would always go in the woods and hunt up for nuts. And we'd sit around the fire and crack nuts at night. There was always a wrestle match before we went to bed. I don't see how my poor mother had any brains. 3 kids and Grandpa wrestling on the floor. Like I said, we had things we had to do, and we were not the best kids in the world, but they weren't the worst parents either. What was expected was if you were told to do it, you did it. If it was told to go get a bucket of coal or get some wood for the fire, you got it, whether you were a boy or a girl, if you were told to get it. But I don't remember my brothers washing dishes. But I do remember going and getting coal and bringing in wood. And I had to help keep the house clean. My mother was pretty well sick all the time. And from the time my little brother Wayne was born, she was always sick. And my responsibility was to help take care of Wayne. And he turned a beehive over on him one time when he was 4 years old. And that was disastrous. He was just covered completely over with beehives, bee bites. And but he recovered. Actually, I don't remember rules. We just grew up. We were kids. We played, and we always, when we didn't live at Grandma's house, we lived close enough that we could run to Grandma's house. And we weren't told that we could never go over there. We couldn't, we knew that we had to watch the corners because there was traffic, not like it is now, but there was traffic. And we just kind of played and did our thing and run back and forth between Grandma and my aunt and uncle lived in the back of the house. And we just kind of did our thing. But if we did something we weren't supposed to do, which I don't remember what it was, but we got a whipping for it. My cousin Juanita and I used to fight a lot. And of course she lived with Grandma and Grandpa at the same time we did. And we were expected to do the dishes. And if we didn't do the dishes without an argument, Grandpa gave us a whipping with his razor strap, which was about that long and about that thick, and it was about that thick leather, worse than a belt. So I knew I better be nice. But we would fight and fall out the back door, and then of course that was it. Grandpa come and got us. And as far as I remember, that's the main punishment I remember, was fighting with my cousin Juanita. And she grew up to be so beautiful. She looked like Jodie Foster. Every time I see Jodie Foster on a movie, I think of Juanita, because she looked just like her. Beautiful blue eyes, blonde hair. Here I'm a little old red-headed, freckle-faced girl. I remember when I was getting ready to go in high school, my dad bought me 2 dresses and a new pair of shoes, which probably wasn't more than $25, if it was that much. And when we were kids, we always got a new pair of shoes for school, and we wore those shoes all summer until the soles wore out. And when the soles wore out, you didn't get any more shoes till school started again. And during the war, you could buy a pair of shoes for $2, but in 2 weeks you had holes in the bottom of your shoes. And you put paper in the bottom of your shoes because you didn't have money to buy any more shoes with. And Mom used to give us a nickel, and then we had a bakery up in Rosedale where it was, the main street was Division Street, and there was Honeycrust Bakery there. and you could buy day-old bread for a nickel. And when we would want candy or anything, I'd beg her for money to buy candy, and she couldn't give us a penny even for candy because she had to save that nickel to buy bread for Dad's lunch. And I don't remember any other prices. Other than the movie, we could collect bottle caps. If we got 10 bottle caps, we could get in the movie for a dime and 10 bottle caps on Saturday. I didn't ever get candy when I went to movie, unless when during the war my grandma fell down and broke her hip, and I washed the dishes and cleaned up the house and mopped the kitchen for my grandpa. He paid me 25 cents a day, and I got to go to the movie, and I'd buy me popcorn because I could get in the show for the 25 cents and buy me some popcorn. So I don't remember exactly what the show was. It must have been 15 cents. And at that time, there was a movie out, which is the most horrifying, scary show I ever saw in my whole life. And if you ever get a chance to see it, you need to see it. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Evansville, the Rosedale, was Division Street, John Street, Sycamore Street, Olive Street. And I ran from the front door of the movie theater to my grandma's front door, completely, never missed a step. Ran home because I was so afraid. And there were people in the way, and I just ran around because I was so afraid. That was the scariest movie I ever saw in my whole life, bar none. But it was fun. We had a good childhood. My Uncle Joe used to come. He had 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 kids, and he always brought 5 pounds of peanuts, and we'd sit out in the front yard and eat peanuts. And when my Uncle Joe left, there was peanuts all over the ground. Well, guess who got to clean them up? The kids that lived there. But it was fun. We didn't have anything, but we didn't know it. Oh, I was 8 or 9 years old before I would even go to a movie because I was scared of movies. The only movies I would go see was Shirley Temple. And in 1939, when Gone with the Wind came out, my dad bought the book, and he read it several times, and my grandpa read it. And when they got done reading it, I got to read it. And that was the big movie, was Gone with the Wind. And I guess that's why it's my favorite, because my dad was just enthralled with that book. And of course, my grandma, my grandpa, and my dad were both big readers. And I guess that's one reason why I like books so well. When I was a little girl, we had radio music. It was always hillbilly music, like back in the Grand Ole Opry. We always listened to that. And in the morning, when they turned the radio on, it was always hillbilly music and banjo. And I can't think of some of the guys' names, but they're just recently died, older men. And the Carter family, which Johnny Cash's wife was one of the Carters, they were big on the radio. And just good down-home music. That's all it was. It wasn't nothing fancy. Always told a story. Then during the war, we had a lot of good music, a lot of military themes to it. And I think, I'm trying to think of some of the names. Purple, there's one purple. Can't think off my head. Paul's favorite thing was a song that was out, was Senior Moment, it's gone too. But anyway, we had a lot of good music. You guys don't know what you're missing if you don't listen to that good music. When we moved out here, that kind of ended that. But both of my older brothers were Western Union bicycle boys that delivered telegrams. They always, both of them worked. But my little brother, he was rotten. He didn't work. I remember when we would go to my grandma and grandpa's over in Kentucky. They lived in a town across the river, which is Henderson. And we would sit in front of the fireplace, and I'd always sit on my grandpa's lap on one side till I got too hot. Then when I got too hot on that side, I'd go and sit on my dad's lap and get out on the other side. And I remember playing with my uncle out in the alley. We played knock the tin can, and you would hit a can as far as you could hit it with a stick, and then somebody run and hide. And when the Kentucky cousins would come over, we'd play hide and seek at Grandpa's house, and we just did kid things. Nobody was afraid of anybody. Not a whole lot of fighting. And my cousins from in Kentucky were mostly little girls at that time, and of course, you know me, I love little girls and little boys too, but I'd put these little girls up in the kitchen sink and wash their hair and comb their hair and give them a bath and play with them like they were dolls, because that's what they were, only they were alive and could walk and talk. I went to several schools in Evansville. My favorite school was Howard Rusa, because that's the one I went to most. I went to Culver School, which Danny, Michael, and Ricky also went to. And Culver, Rusa. I went to Chestnut Walnut School for a while. As you can see, we moved around quite a bit because cheapest place for rent is where we moved. And that's about the three that I went to. And I was getting ready to be a senior when I got married. My mother was only a third grade person, and my dad, I don't think he went over the fourth grade. And writing was very illegible for my mother. I'm about the only one in the whole wide world who could read her writing. But my dad's, he was left-handed, but he had a plain, legible handwriting. Everybody wanted to get a high school diploma because that was the thing that would help get you a job. And which now, you know, it's a college education. It was public education, and we had to buy our own books. I was amazed when we moved to Washington that we didn't have to buy books. All your supplies and books your parents had to pay for. We only had one black school in Evansville, and it was called Lincoln. And black kids were not in our schools at all. No Orientals. Although there were Orientals in town because there was a real good Oriental restaurant downtown. In 1937, I think I was in the third grade, second or third grade. I think I was going into the third grade. And we had a big flood. And they tied gunny sacks over the faucets at the school, and we weren't allowed to drink the water. And you had to boil your water because of diphtheria. And all the kids were given shots for diphtheria. Smallpox was another thing that was real bad. And when we got the measles, we stayed in bed with the window blinds pulled down in the dark because it was such a bad disease. And they always said it would cause blindness, which I guess they still say it can cause blindness. But as near as I can remember, that's the three main things. And whenever someone got measles, they would put a quarantine sign on your house. Yeah. When we had measles at my grandma's house, there was a sign on the front. Of course, fortunately for us, none of us ever got diphtheria or smallpox, but we did all have measles. We got vaccinations for diphtheria and smallpox. Now, I don't remember ever having one for measles, but I don't know when that came about. And maybe since we had measles, we didn't need it. Well, I always wanted to be a mother, and I wanted to have a nice house, but also wanted to be a nurse. But when I studied in high school and found out how hard it is for, how hard and how long, and anatomy and those things were a little bit beyond my education abilities, I decided I didn't want to be a nurse. Beside that, I think I would have fainted the first time I saw blood. I only had one job before I got married, and I was a car hop at the drive-in. I never had to work. Grandpa never would let me. You go out to the car and take their menu, and then you take it back to them and put their little tray on the car like down at the A&W used to be. I guess they still are. As I remember, it was only $1 a day, and then whatever tips you could make. And I didn't make real good tips because I didn't get work that very much. But girls that worked a full shift, they made pretty good money, because sometimes people would even leave $2, which was unheard of in that day. If you got 10 cents, you were fortunate. Quarter was great, but 50 cents to $1 was absolutely over the top. But some of the girls would get $2. So I only worked there one summer. I lived with my family until we got married, although I stayed at Levant's house a lot. She was my best girlfriend. And that's where I met Grandpa. I was 17 years old when I left home, and I left home because I got married to Paul. I was 16 years old when I met Paul. He was just out of the Navy a few months. He was the brother of my best girlfriend, Levant. We would drive down to the river, and there was a place called Riverview Gardens, and of course Grandpa, you know, he was a boozer, and we would watch him dance and that kind of stuff, but I never did dance. My dad always tried to teach me to dance, but I'm too dumb. I always regretted that because I loved to watch people dance. And another entertainment we did was we'd go to the car races, and I really enjoyed the car races, and I guess Grandpa did too, but we outgrew that. And of course, when you got 5 kids, you don't take 5 kids to the car races on Sunday afternoon. They're getting no money. I had no idea that he would be the man I'd spend 58 years with. But he was the most beautiful man you ever saw. He looked like a movie star. And I guess that's what cooked me. That was one time we went out, we went to the carnival, and that was taken at the carnival. The carnival picture. Probably 50 cents. I don't really know. Paul paid for it, of course. Back then, girls did not pay for their date. If a boy asked you to go with them, they did all the paying. Girls did not pay. Of course, it wasn't done any good because I didn't have any money. He came home in April, and we didn't go out until in the summer. I don't even remember what month it was, but we got married in November. We just decided to get married, and we went to Henderson, Kentucky, and we were married in the parsonage office, or home, the Parson's home, not Parson, is it Parson? The pastor's home, with a beautiful old Victorian type house, had a silver iron fence around it. November the 8th, it was on a Saturday. And when we grew up, families were the friends. We didn't have friends, so to speak, like 10 or 15 people that you call friends. Our family was our friends. And we visited each other and congregated at each other's house, and that was just kind of what it was. We had 5 kids, and there are 4 boys and 1 girl. And we thought we never would get a little girl, but we finally did, and she made a sensation in our town. When they found out we had a little girl, people were just telling each other all day long, Paul had a little girl, Paul had a little girl. I didn't have anything to do with it. But Danny was first, then Michael, then Ricky, and then David, and then Lydia. Danny's name is going to sound silly, but it's the truth. There was a little guy in my 3rd grade class, and his dad was the preacher of the church that we went to, and his name was Danny. His name was Danny Wilder. And I thought, if I ever have a little boy, I'm going to name him Danny. And Danny sit in front of me, and I would rub my hand up the back of his head when he get a haircut. I guess he was really my first boyfriend, but I still remember Danny Wilder, and that's why I named him Danny. And then I named him Danny Wayne because my brother's name is Wayne. And Michael came along, and I liked Michael, and Paul's Uncle Joe was his favorite person, so we named him Michael Welburn, which is, Joe was a nickname for Welburn. And then Ricky came along, and I had several names I wanted to name Ricky, but Paul didn't like any of them, and he wanted to name him Richard Allen. So we settled on Richard Allen. And for years and years and years, we didn't know it, but he's got a cousin named Richard Allen, and he's the same age as me. And Richard Allen Pfingston in Indiana, his name was spelled A-L-L-E-N, and Ricky's name is A-L-A-N, which I spelled it that way because Alan Ladd was one of my favorite movie stars. And David, I had several names I picked out for him too, but we just kind of settled on David Paul. And Louise at that time was about the only Christian in the family that was really practicing, and she said, that's a mighty name to live up to. So then when Lydia came along, I couldn't really make up my mind what I wanted to name her. And I bought a little dress before she was born because I wanted a little girl so bad. And I'll remember it was blue and white check, and it had the name Lydia in the tag. I thought, that's a beautiful name. I'm going to name her Lydia. And I thought, I want to name her Susan or Suzanne, but I can't just name her Suzanne or Susan because my brothers would call her Susie, and I don't want her to be called Susie. So I named her Lydia Suzanne. I was 18 when Danny was born, and I was 26 when Lydia was born. Really, I didn't have any fears of it, but when you go to the hospital, the first thing they did, they would put you under ether, and I barely even knew I had a pain because they kept me under anesthetic, and same with Michael. And then when Ricky was born, I decided I'm going to find out what having a baby's all about. So I stayed home, and believe me, I found out what having a baby was all about. We left the house at 6 o'clock, and we had to drive across town, and Paul got lost on the way to the hospital, had a fit on the wind, I might add, and Ricky was born at 7:25 that night. So I knew exactly what having a baby meant. And then when David was born, we lived in Paducah, Kentucky, so because Paul was working down there, but I came home a week before, and we stayed at his Aunt Dorothy's house until I had to go to the hospital. And I was in hospital all night long before he was born at 6 in the morning. And we lived on Jefferson Street when Lydia was born. And she was born at 3 in the afternoon. Daylight saving time. Grandpa, when we first got married, he worked for Briggs Automobile Factory. And we rented a one-room bachelorette apartment. It was just one great big room with a small kitchenette. $11 a week. It was upstairs. We shared a bathroom down the hall. And when we moved away from there, I can't remember which house we moved into, but we moved a lot because we kept getting a better place. But when we moved away from the apartment that was $11 a week, we took little Buddy with us. My dad, Buddy, when we go out to take the garbage out, Buddy was just a little bitty sharp puppy, a little black thing. And we both fell in love with him, and when my dad come to help us move, he stuck him in his coat pocket. And he was just he couldn't have been over 6 weeks old. And he lived with us to be 15 years old. Grouchy, gripiest, meanest little dog ever lived. He didn't like anybody but us, but he loved us. The kids could sit on him, they could walk on him, they could step on his tail, but nobody else's kids could touch him. He was just a real gripey little guy. We lived on Jefferson Street. That was when Lydia was just a toddler. And I don't remember who got that carnival outfit, but probably my dad, because he was always picking up junk somewhere. And we set it up in the backyard, and they just had a ball with that carnival. It just was a lot of fun for them. It was cardboard and paper. I don't think there was any plastic to it. And that was probably 1957, right before we moved to Washington, actually, the summer before we moved out here in the next year. Well, like I said, we moved several times when we lived in Evansville because we usually got a better place. And after we, I think in 1951 or 52, Paul went to Paducah, Kentucky to work in the atomic energy area down there. And then after that, he came home for a few months, and then we moved the whole family to Paducah, and we lived down there about 18 months. Ricky was not quite a year old when we moved down there, and he learned to walk when we lived in Paducah. And then we moved back home when David was born. Like I said, he was born in Evansville, but we still lived in Paducah. And then after we moved from Paducah, we moved back to my grandmother's house in the apartment back there. And then we moved on to Jefferson Street, which we lived in Jefferson Street house until we moved to Washington, which Grandpa's work looked really, really good, and he went and bought a brand new Buick, prettiest thing you ever saw, and we were so proud of it. And they said they had at least a year's work, and I think we made one payment or two, and the bottom fell out of work, and he was completely unemployed, and we lost the car. It had to be repossessed. And Ruby and Ollie at that time were living here, and they wrote us a letter and told us if we wanted to come out that Paul could get work out here. And Ollie sent us $400, and we packed up the car and the kids and left. And I had no idea that we'd ever stay. I thought, well, we'll be back, because we were buying the house that we were living in, and we just left everything. And of course, once we moved to Portland, he had 2 years' work, so then we let the people take the house back. We rented it for a while. Grandpa's sister, Vivian, and my dad packed up my dad's truck, and my mother and dad brought our stuff out here from Evansville to Portland. And we lived in Portland from 1958 in August until August of 1960. Then we moved into a house over on Park Avenue, and we lived there for about a year. And his brother Raymond was building houses, so he built us a house over on Oak Street, which is still there, 6229 South Oaks. And we lived there for 18 months, and then Ray built this house, and we moved here almost 44 years ago. It's 43 years ago this past September.
My name is Paul Pfingston, and my date of birth is December the 8th, 1924. I'm 81 years old. My mother's name was Mary Elizabeth Knight, her maiden name, and my dad's name was Albert Pfingston. I don't know exactly where I was born at.
You were born on Lodge Avenue in Evansville, Indiana, Vanderburgh County, Indiana.
According to her, I was born on Lodge Avenue. I lived in Vanderburgh County. I lived on Lodge Avenue and fought on every corner. Yeah, my grandmother but raised me and my twin brother, and he died when he was in 1989, 29. He died in 29, yeah. My grandpa died in 29. His name was, good God, I don't know what his name was. Pfingstons, it was Pfingstons.
Grandpa's name was William
Van.
William Van.
Well, you know more about that guy than I do.
I remember, you don't. Tell when your grandma died.
Who?
When did your grandma die?
She died in 41. Oh,
No.
I'm pretty sure they did. If they hadn't, they wasn't far from being immigrants when they got here.
We think they're second generation immigrants.
Well, back in them days, people were people. And if you wanted to, if that's the only place you got to go, they'll take you in.
Why your mother wasn't there?
She was dead. They died in the barn.
3 months. She died when they were 3 months old. She had 5 other children. She died from childbirth.
My dad, he died. He died when he was 95 years old.
Right. But tell them, where was your dad when you were living with your grandmother?
He lived next door. He was living next door to where me and my twin brother was staying. I had I guess I had 3 brothers.
You had 2 brothers,
How about Raymond?
Raymond and Virgil, and you had 4 sisters.
Yeah, I had 4 sisters. Well, the oldest one was named Ruby. She married a baker. And and then they come Pearl. She married anybody she could get.
Pearl was married 3 times. Jimmy Luck's dad was her second husband. Her first husband. And then she married a man named Clark. Then she married Larry Bitts. And they were married for over 60 years, I think.
Oh, I got a history.
And who's after Pearl?
Who?
What's your sister after Pearl?
That's Louise. She was last, and Vivian was my first sister to die. She was the youngest. She was 50 years old when she died. Raymond was, how old was he when he died?
He was 57 years old and he died
Yeah,
in
57 years old when he died. And his son was 55 years old when he died.
That was Butch he's talking about.
That was Butch. You know Butch. And who else?
Virgil, your twin brother.
Yeah, he died. Well, I was on my way back to Indiana one day to visit him back there, and because he was in the hospital, and he died before I got there. So he got wiped out. Huh.
You can remember your grandpa.
Oh yeah, my grandpa, my little puppy dog, and
What was your pup's name?
Beats the heck out of me. He was a little black and white spaniel. He wasn't big as our dog. Well, it was three of us, me and Edward and my twin brother. We stoked the fire in the morning for everybody to get up. And one morning was my turn, one morning was the other guy's turn, the next morning the other guy. So you take your turn. Be sure you got your kindling wood in so you can build your fire and get her to going.
What did the boys have to do, and then what did the girls have to do?
Well, I don't know about the girls because they didn't live with us. They lived over next door, and I didn't know anything what they did or what kind of chores they had. I had no idea. What was that cowboy's name that died down there? Oh,
Buck Rogers? No.
Oh, there was several of them.
Spaceman. Tim Holt and...
Well, I know all of them.
He's talking about the cowboys that you used to go see.
I'm talking about the ones I used to go see.
Oh, all right.
It's
Ken
Rogers.
Maynard?
Ken Maynard, oh yeah, Ken Maynard. He was my favorite. And you don't have Ken Maynard on there, do you?
No, he's asking you the questions. He don't know.
Oh. Oh God, there's a bunch of them. What are you laughing about? There's a bunch of them cowboy pictures we like. Buck Rogers.
No, he was a spaceman.
He was a who?
Spaceman.
Spaceman?
Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon were like in the future. They weren't cowboys.
Well, I always figured Buck Rogers was one of my buddies.
No, there's one named Buck, but that ain't the one you're talking
Buck
about.
Rogers. Well, what about the guy who bought the team? That team and sold it. What was his name?
I don't know.
He sold that ball team. He bought a ball team down.
Gene Autry?
Gene Autry. We used to go to watch Gene Autry too. Oh, on special nights you could get in for a nickel. And if that wasn't on, it cost you a dime. Lodge Avenue School, that's straight up the
When
road.
I went to, I forgot.
Huh?
I went there too. I forgot that.
Lodge School. Oh, we had to have vaccinated for about everything. It seemed like we was always taking shots. Let's see, I guess I worked for a guy downtown mixing mud for his concrete blocks. He got mad at me, and I got mad at him. I told him what I thought, and he told me what he thought. I said, I'll see you later. So, I didn't work for him very long.
What about the zoo?
Oh, no, I worked across the street from the zoo on that CCC program they had. You know what that is? It's back when fellows was my age, they'd put them in you could go in the CCCs, and you could get shipped out to maybe 50, 60 miles from home, or you could stay there and work for these building these buildings for CCC guys. You could stay there and work on them buildings, and just be there.
It was a camp for young men, and they paid them to work on public work products. And around the mountain over here, you can probably see a lot of work that the CCC men did.
Yeah, they made a lot of those paths up there.
And they were paid.
A lot of those paths.
Not much. I don't know how. My cousins were in it, but I don't have any idea how much it would have been. They furnished them room and board, and they did get a little bit of money on the side.
Oh, yeah, they got, Raymond was in the CC. He got up there and got to fight, and they kicked his ass out.
Watch your mouth.
Well, I got drafted. And as soon as they drafted me, well, I hung up my tools and had a good time until they put the rope around me and tucked me on down.
Where'd you have to go to when you got drafted?
I went to Great Lakes. I joined the Navy, and Roberto, he joined the Army. And I went to Great Lakes and done my calisthenics and whatnot.
And he said the day that they were 18 years old, they got their invitation to join the Navy, or join the Marines, or whatever, the service.
When my card come in, I was 18 years old. I also had a draft card. Greetings, you are now drafted. Well, we know where it's going. There wasn't no two ways to get around it. So you had to go. Or they'd grab you up and take you anyway. Well, they fed us and everything. Didn't worry about nothing. So, you know, when you're a young guy, you don't give a shit about nothing as long as you get to eat. Packed up what I needed and took off. Went down to the train station, got on the train. First train I ever rode on. Me and my brother both got on. When they come around and give you something to do, well, you did it. Sweep the streets or whatever it is. I didn't want to walk. I know when they got on, he got that army, he had to walk. So I didn't want to walk. I wanted to get on one of them ships and ride. Well, we done all our training up in Great Lakes. And I went to Miami. Stayed there for 3 or 4 days. Went from there up the coast. I finally ended up in, what's the name of that town?
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I was there for 2 years, I guess. Maybe even 3.
Oh, you weren't there that long.
Huh?
You were only in the service 3 years.
Well, how you know I didn't do it all in one place?
Because you were in the Philippines.
I was over there only a year. But anyhow, I spent a lot of time there in Florida. What they were doing there, you're not supposed to tell what this is. This base was a SEAL base. And they could throw your ass in jail or even hang you. But hey, anymore, it's all duck soup. They's making these torpedoes they could shoot them out and they'd follow the boat and sink it.
It was a secret base, a secret station where they were experimenting.
Yeah, it was very, very secret. Well, I went up, I got tired of being there. I went up and asked for a transfer, and they sent me to, what's the name of that place down there? At the very end.
Key West?
Huh?
Key West?
Key West. I went to Key West, stayed there for about a month or 2, and left out of there when I got my orders. And for further duty outside the continental United States. I was heading for San Diego, California. Had all my gear. When that train come through Evansville, I got off. Stayed 2 days and got back on. Went on down to where I was supposed to be going. When I got down there, the guy was in charge. He says, "All I want to know is how come you're 2 days late?" I says, "Well, that train is going through my hometown. My order read for outside the continental limits of the United States. So I decided to get off for a couple of days." I got off, spent 2 days, got back on, and come on west. He said, "Well, at least you ain't lying about it." he said, "I won't put no marks against you." But he did put me on the street, sweeping streets. I had to go out there and sweep streets for 10 days. Hell, they didn't have nothing to do anyway. As of San Diego, I went up to San Mateo, and from there I kept working over, and went and got on the ship and started west. Got on the ship.
Where'd the ship take you?
Well, he stopped at Honolulu, and then we went on to those islands over there, somewhere in the Pacific over there, where they'd been battles because they had a burnt-out ship there, but I could not tell you whose ship it was, or who owned it, or who got killed in it. Because all it was just black, like that on that thing. It was black. You couldn't tell who it belonged to. Belonged to the U.S. or belonged to Japanese or who. You didn't know. So you just had to make your own guess as to what was on it. And I know I read after I got out of service, I read somewhere where them ships down there was full of dead Japanese, and these Japanese was going down there and getting them and taking them back to Japan. So that's the only thing I could think of they could be.
And then you ended up where?
I ended up in the hell's the name of that place?
Did you say Samar?
No, in Samar. I ended up in what is the name of that damn? It's an island over there.
The Philippine island.
Philippines.
Yeah.
I ended up in the Philippines, and I ended up on an island on the right side, out toward the east. That's the only place I know of ever having 2 Tuesdays in 1 week. we go sailing west, and we got out to International Dateline, and I was on guard duty. Of course, everybody else was in bed, so I just stayed on guard duty. And it had come on and said it's now Tuesday. Or anyhow, we had two Tuesdays in that one week.
When you passed the international date line.
I would never notice if it hadn't
card.
come over the
You
loudspeaker.
can't even read it anymore. It's so old. It's about like a credit card.
Oh, when we left the base, them damn punk guys, I'll bet you that crap was deep as this thing. I don't know how they walked around in it. You know, they puked, belched all that crap up.
I don't think we need to hear that.
Oh, God, what a mess. I went over and stood on the side and peed over the side and spit over the side. That's before we even got underneath the bridge. Whew.
San Francisco Bridge.
It don't bother me. Water don't bother me. Food? Well, on the boat, traveling the way I was, all you got was an apple for breakfast, for dinner. They give you a big red apple. That was it. Then you had breakfast, and you had some food at night.
Well, when was it you had the Navy beans?
The Navy beans.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever having any.
He said every Wednesday they had Navy beans for breakfast.
Well, that was it. That was after you got landed.
Oh.
They had bunk beds that start here at this stanchion, go over to the next one, and there'd be a bunk bed there, a bunk bed, bunk bed, bunk bed. And and somewhere in that mess you had one. So it wasn't bad. Well, that was just that way on the way over. And after we got there, well, we had the Seabees built us a camp, so we had metal, for
Quinta hut.
yeah, Quincy hut. We had a Quincy hut, and we had good places to stay. Oh, it took me a long time to figure out what we was doing there. And we were going to start unloading ammunition. And but the war ended before the ammunition got there. So we didn't have to fool with it. I was walking down Lodge Avenue when they said that them guys attacked over there on Lodge Avenue.
Evansville, Indiana.
Evansville. What?
That was before.
What?
December the 7th. You weren't in the Navy yet, were you?
No, I wasn't in the Navy yet.
They didn't start the draft until after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor.
Oh, they had the draft.
They had a draft, but
yeah, they had the draft, but but I wasn't old enough yet. I wasn't old enough. See, when I was at that age, I was still like 2 years of being old enough. We done about anything we wanted to. We had a 500-pound bomb sitting out there by a tree. I made me a flip, and the trees was full of monkeys. I'd get out there and sit on that bomb and shoot them monkeys. That was my having fun. I never really hurt none of them. I hit a limb or something, and they'd jump around and holler and squeal and carry on. I thought, to be where we was at and what we was doing, I thought we had pretty good pay.
Do you remember what it was?
No, I can't remember what it was. But we got the same pay every month. They get much news? Oh yeah, we got news all the time. We know where they were sitting. We only had one bad time. I thought we might get our ass shot off. These guys out there in the woods drinking, in the jungle actually. Drinking and carrying on. One of them had one of them guns that shoots darts and things or whatever. And here come a airplane across the jungle. He just flying just above the trees. And he got up there about the right place. This guy fired that damn thing at that thing. I said, oh shit, I better get the hell out of here. Because if he starts shooting, he'll shoot everybody around here. And that guy, I said, well, I'll be gone before he makes the trip back. Shit, he turned that thing upside down and come in. He was back there before I could even get off my feet. I said, oh God, man, this might be it. Well, not really. I had 2 or 3 guys there that used to work with me in my work. I was a carpenter. And they were young fellows, like you guys were. to me, and I was young, but they was younger than me. And they used to come over and they'd work with me, and they'd do everything I tell them. And I suggest anything, and they're ready for it. So we got along just fine. I wrote a letter. That's the only way you could do it, was a letter. Write a letter. And you had a P.O. box in San Francisco. And your letter would go there, then they'd distribute where it was supposed to go.
What didn't you like about it?
You know, really, there was nothing I didn't like about it. I got along with everybody. Some of them I didn't, but anyhow, we all got along and done our thing. One didn't push the other one. You don't dare do that. Well, when I loaded up from the Philippines, I was on my way home. The war was over. Yeah, I was on my way home when I left the Philippines. I was on the boat heading back when it come in down to San Francisco. Well, they sent me over to a place where they put out the money, you know. And they went over and they paid me half of what I had coming. They said, give you the rest of it when you get back, you know. So I took my money and jumped on a train and come home. My plans were already made. I had to go back to Great Lakes and get mustered out. I was still in the Navy when I got home. The only thing is I already had a date set to go to Great Lakes and get mustered out of the service. So that was the last time that was on, what was the date on that thing? 36?
No, you got discharged on April the 6th, 1946.
Well,
is that right?
Sounds about right. Yeah, I got discharged, but I had to go up there and they give you a physical. First thing I do is ask, anything wrong with you? Because you ain't gonna tell them anything wrong with you. Hell, it'd be crazy. They take you over and keep you. So you just say, no, there's nothing wrong with me. I had a ear, you couldn't hear nothing then. At the Great Lakes?
After you got discharged?
I went down when I left Great Lakes, I went down to Florida.
No, he's talking about after you got out of the service.
After I got out, I just come on back home. Loaded up in a train. They paid for the train. Come on back to Evansville. Yeah, I finally got a job. I took a job. I forget what I was doing now. I don't know what I was up to. I was shaving a little old squirt, that's all I know. Yeah, we had that tucket at a carnival. We was down there riding the rides, you know. And they had that machine sitting there, so we walked over and got in there and got our picture took. I'm surprised it lasts as long as it has.
Well, Shelley had a friend that took the carnival picture and restored it, and then Lydia had these made.
Enlarged.
Uh-huh. Well, Shelley had us one enlarged, and then Lydia had some more made off of it.
Does that work in Slurville?
No, you were working at Briggs.
Briggs.
Chrysler Briggs is what it was. And then he hauled coal for a while. And then he got into the steam fitter, pipe fitters local, and went to work for that in 1949.
And he did that for how long?
37 years he was in sprinkler work, or 40?
It was 40 something.
Yeah.
In the sprinkler work.
He retired in 87.
Well, this is where the company I was working for is here in Tacoma. And so when they got caught up down south, I came back with them. And I stayed with them for, I think, 15 years. I think they was all about to get sick of me and finally kicked me out.
That company went bankrupt.
Yeah, they did go bankrupt. I come down, of course I was working every day. I'd come down on weekends and do what I could. I dug that basement out over there. Of course, he rented equipment. No, it's quite a deal. Of course, I like my weekends off too, you know. It's when I work 5-6 days a week, well, I'd ready to take a day off too. We used to go camping every weekend. We camp ever,
Every weekend we could. Summer down, and when we lived in Portland, we didn't have any money to do anything for entertainment, but we had to eat. So I'd take what food we have at home, and we'd buy a tank of gas, and we'd go as far as we could go on what we had for gas money. And we traveled over in eastern Oregon and around, and that's why some of those pictures you see are like of the dunes and all that stuff is where we took.
You're gonna hit me in the nose.
Maybe you need it. But anyway, we camped. That was our entertainment. And then when we moved back up here, of course we hiked when we come up here. When we camped at Mount Rainier from when we lived in Portland, we'd come up here and everybody go camping, and we'd go hiking on Mount Rainier up there. Then when we lived here, we went hiking all the time. We used to go to Dulce Wallops all the time up on the Hoods Canal. And in the wintertime, 2-3 times a year, we'd go up and take the kids to play in the snow. And kids all remember that. Danny started in grade. He was in the 9th grade. Michael was in the 6th grade. Your dad was in the 5th grade. David was in the 3rd grade. Lydia started 1st grade. Danny, David, and Lydia had a really hard time, but they were good average students. But your dad and Michael, they just seemed like learning was their thing. They didn't have to work real hard for good grades. They made better grades than the rest of them. But when Lydia got in high school, then it just, whatever was making her as slow as she was just snapped, and she only like 1 point being an honor student. And I should have went to the school, which I didn't. She should have been on the honor roll. But it just seemed like her learning situation just completely flipped over for her. And of course, like I said, your dad and Uncle Mike, they were both always big readers. And I think that was their main asset, because they liked to read. And your dad, his 5th grade teacher, told me that there were 5 boys in his class, and they challenged each other to see who could get the best grades. So you know what your dad did. But Danny and David and Lydia did have to work pretty hard for their grades. Danny was in the 2nd graduating class after Mount Tahoma was built. And then every 2 years we had a graduation. And they didn't think they were ever going to run out of Pfingstons. Danny was 18 years old when he joined the Marine Corps. And he was 20 when he got married. And he married Gail in San Diego, and then he left to go to Vietnam.
No, sir. I don't tell nobody going to the military. He brought that on himself. He come in here one day and he says that he wanted to sign up to go to the Marines. I said, well, that's all up to you. There ain't nothing I can do about it. If you want to go, I ain't going to hold you back. He wanted to go, so if that's what he wanted, it suited me just fine.
I naturally didn't want him to go, but not much I could do about it. It was a sorrowful time when he was in Vietnam. We had 3 guys in Vietnam out of our family at the same time. Danny and Ruby's, not Ruby, but Louise's son, Randy, and Vivian's son, Stevie, were all over there at the same time. We had communication, but he had Gail, because they were married then. Most of his letters come through Gail, but he did write to us. No, Uncle Mike wasn't in the military. And when the war kept going on in Vietnam, they had what they called a lottery. And all the young guys had to sign up, when, if they were of age. And we had your dad, Gary and Larry Baker, Shannon, who else? Somebody else. David. And I'm sure Ray was in it. But of course that time he wasn't in our family. We had all these guys that were in that lottery. And your dad's the only one to draw a low number. If you draw a low number, you had to go. And he drawed 89. And he got sent to the Army. And I took him down. Lydia's first optical shop used to be the Selective Service Center. And that's where he had to report to when he went into the Army. And he was inducted into the Army there, sent to Fort Lewis. And he was stationed at Fort Lewis the whole 2 years he was in the Army, except for 3 months when he went to Georgia for military training. He lived at home the whole 2 years. David never had to go, neither did Michael.
That ain't no fair. They took me, and they was shooting over.
Danny made me a mother before I was 20, and she made me a grandmother before I was 40, because she was born when I was 39. Shelley. Shelley was born in December, and I was 40 in April. Yes, Uncle Mike was married to a girl named Linda O'Hara, and they lived together for 4 years, and they got a divorce. No children, supposedly. Which we think she does have one by Michael. Well, he was in basic training in California. Then he came back to Fort Lewis. I'm talking about Rick. And then he was sent to Georgia for military training school. And then he was there for 3 months and came home. And then he lived at home the rest of the time. He was in the Army. And he was in the Army Reserves for 4 years after he got out of the service, which was required of everybody. He had some really good jobs. He worked for I don't remember the first place he worked for, but he worked for Rainier Bank in Seattle for 2 years, over 2 years, because he lived in Seattle 2 years. And while he was working there, he got to shake hands with Glenn Ford. I told him, I said, why don't you never wash that hand? Which Glenn Ford, of course, is one of our favorites. And he went to work for a place called Business and Office they do all kinds of, you know how they make the farms where the little office cobies and the office furniture's all put in together. He did that for several years. And then when he was 16 years old, he worked a lot with Paul's brother Ray, and Ray taught him a lot. I'm talking about Ricky in case anybody wants to know. Ray taught him an awful lot about real estate and house building, and that's kind of what he tended to want to do all through his life. Then after that was construction work. He moved into an apartment with Ray when he was 18 years old. Him and Ray were good friends. And I guess he was 19 because he wanted to move out when he was 18 and I wouldn't let him. Sad day. Don't ever do that again.
Why didn't you let him go?
I didn't think he was old enough to move away from home. He had a home, why leave? But he lived with Ray for a while, and then he did come back home, I think. I don't remember. And then him and Marilyn got married, and he got into sprinkler work. She lived at home until she married Ray, and she was not quite 20. It didn't happen. Michael was already back home by then. We've never been without somebody. Michael came back home in 1973. Your dad, Ricky, and your mother, Barbara. Rick and Barbara. First Danny and Gail, then Rick and Barbara, then Lydia and Ray, and Marilyn and David both got married in the same year, which was 1976, the year that 200th anniversary of the United States.
Well, you're going to have to ask her any questions because I got to go to bed. I'm sleepy.
Old soldiers never died. They just fade away.
Well,
Same goes for old sailors, I guess.
I've been out there shooting too much, so I had to come in and rest.
His backbone feels like a dinosaur. He never wanted to be a world traveler. He wanted to see the United States, but he never would go to the East Coast because there's too many people. So we didn't go to the East Coast.
No. No, I just wanted to get a good job and make some money. That's all I was after. If you make good money, well, you have a good living.
Say good night.
Good night, Sam. I said, oh shit, I better get the hell out of here.